Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with Alex Wang, visual effects supervisor for The Last of Us. And this video game version of The Last of Us is already incredibly cinematic in its scope with its visuals. So, what was for you the biggest challenge in translating that and recreating those visuals on screen?
First of all, thanks, Sam, for having me on. So for the post-apocalyptic genre, it's nothing new to both the video game and the film industry. So we really wanted to do something that was different. And when we look at the game, we always turn to the game because the game had this really naturalistic feel to it. And that's kind of what we wanted to bring to this new medium.
Yeah. And your work, I think, is very important for sort of setting the tone of that world. I'm thinking about like Boston with the buildings toppled into one another. It looks like a war zone. So much of it is, building out these insane cityscapes. What was the process of translating that into these cityscapes into a crumbling apocalyptic war zone?
It's really easy with the post-apocalyptic world to kind of turn the knob to 11. So I think it's always for us, we really wanted to stand back and almost take a step back and see what we could do. I always like to when we attempt a shot to look at it and say, okay, how can we tell the story with just 20 brushstrokes? Like what can we do to really minimize the amount of kind of post-apocalyptic sort of nature to it? And a lot of it was just to be done with intention. When you bring up the collapsed building to kind of the war-torn Boston city, and it's really looking into, okay, how would this building, what would it be like? It's easy to punch holes through buildings and make everything really war-torn, but I think it's just trying to make every single brushstroke with intention. So whether it be how a building collapses, the physics of it, does it feel real? What does actually happen? The overgrowth, what kind of overgrowth would grow on the walls here? Where in Massachusetts, what type of overgrowth would grow in Massachusetts? So just really, I think all of those things subconsciously really build into how things feel.
Yeah, there's a lot of storytelling, I think, visual storytelling in that too, because you can get a sense of maybe what happened. So, do you start out with, say, a pristine building and then, mess it up along the way? What's the process there?
Yeah, so there's multiple sort of avenues that we go down to with this. So there's the approach where I really wanted to, with certain scenes, give the director, showrunners, and the DP the sort of latitude to really play with the world, meaning less blue screens, right? Because I think with the when it comes to setting blue screens and green screens up, a lot of that becomes I can see it, but the DP might have a hard time under sort of framing for the shot. So I think being in the practical locations, which I really pushed for along with the showrunners, is to really utilize and embrace the locations that we're in. Meaning, and then with that said, we would really augment almost an entire location into being this post-apocalyptic world. And then on top of that, yeah, sometimes we would still have our blue screen sets and we would have to create our world entirely. And we would start many times going back to things feeling tangible and making sure things were made with intention. We would start with a pristine building and we would sort of do these tests of how that building in CG would collapse. That way we're kind of playing with something that started from real and saying, okay, well, that wouldn't feel realistic if it was this way, or okay, that feels a little bit more realistic. And most of the time it was just more making things more subtle, to be honest.
Yeah. The infected in this series also have a brand new way of infecting people with these disgusting tendrils that kind of come out of their mouth. What was the process of like finding the movement? Because it's almost like they're these alive little creatures coming out of them.
Yeah, that process was really abstract, and it started really early on when we were still in prep because Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, they knew that this sort of new abstract nature of how the tendrils moved, and they were willing to explore how they wanted that movement to be. They wanted it to be again naturalistic, need to be based on something that we can find in the real world. Meaning, so because it's something with the tendril that's really easy for it to go into the sci-fi realm and look alien-like. So we definitely, there are many, many tests. If you see the very early tests, it looked very alien-like to, and then we kept steering it to something that was more, again, subtle. And I think what really hit home with developing that, and I think Storm Studios in Norway did a wonderful job with that, is that they really wanted to feel like there's this delicate thing. It's so delicate and so brittle, yet it's so deadly, right? So I think once Craig said that, I'm like, okay, I think we're onto something here. I think I know exactly what you want.
Yeah. And speaking of those infected, there is one of the most epic scenes from the whole series is when they're trying to escape Kansas City and a whole army of them sort of bursts through the ground, which I would imagine has to be a mixture of some actual performers and also digital creatures. So what is that like trying to create something digital that needs to realistically live alongside a real life person?
Yeah, I mean that scene, the cul-de-sac scene in episode 5 was there was a lot of planning that went into that. We always, the thing that I love about this show is we always, when we go to camera, the intention is always what can we get practically rather than what can we fix it in post or whatever. So what that means is just a lot of planning that goes into okay, what can be caught and captured in camera. And really what that comes down to is understanding from a even from a choreography standpoint of when the infected come out, when is the effects going to take over. We previs the entire scene from start to finish to understand the movements and the actions. And once everyone bought into it, we that's sort of how we went about that scene. And I think with it was really important to make sure that the infected and the infected really was flawlessly done, so that so it never took the audience out as when we could tell like okay that's a CG clicker or infected and then there's a practical. We never wanted that to happen. So I worked really closely with Barry Gower from
Mhm.
the prosthetics team to really make sure that he set the bar very high with their prosthetics and the makeup, as did costumes and hair. Everyone did. So we wanted to make sure that we capture all that data of the infected, their makeup, their costumes, so that when we capture that data, we can recreate their assets digitally. So that when we added a lot more infected into the scene, into the cul-de-sac scene, it was seamless.
Hmm. And when you are collaborating with someone like Barry, how do you, meet and decide actually what elements of this clicker need to be practical and where am I going to take over with a digital effect on a character?
Um, that's a great question. I mean, I think it really comes down to uh the scene, the shot by shot, sometimes the actions. If we go back to say episode 2 with the museum when we
Mm,
first see the clickers, that scene is so intimate, and we really wanted it to have this practical feel of that they were really there. Not to say that we couldn't achieve that in visual effects, but I think we just wanted to really fool the audience, so to speak, by because there's actually some digital clickers in that scene, but my theory is if there's enough practical performance that really gets the audience immersed into that scene, And we, with our digital clickers, if they're done just as well, the audience will be fooled.
Yeah. You mentioned that cul-de-sac scene before, and so I would assume that you are responsible for the moment where the bloater rips that man apart, which is a great callback to the video game. Were you basing it? Because there's this moment if you do poorly in certain sections of the game where you may meet a similar fate. Was it a callback to that?
Yes, yeah, that was definitely a homage to the video game. We originally started out with the idea of, okay, maybe we want to, maybe Perry gets his body ripped in half, and we tried so many different iterations of seeing what that would look like, and it was hard for it to not look a little comical. So we settle for just really ripping from the head, which, as you said, in the game, I don't know if you played a game, but
Oh, it did.
when you are about 3 feet away from the bloater, that's what happens to you, right?
Right. Yeah. It was a great callback. And the fandom of this is very intense, and they are certainly ones who are picking through, these visuals. What has your interaction been like with them?
uh, I've been really appreciative of. I'll tell you what, I've uh, been in this industry for 20 years, and I've worked on various shows, big and small, but I've never worked on something quite like The Last of Us, where there's such a following from not just the people that play the video games, but I think the fandom grew as the show kind of progressed,
Yeah.
which is incredible. And I it's there's nothing more than what we do, and I mean in every department, but I can only speak for visual effects, is for the show to be appreciated, because we put a lot of hard work and time, and there's especially on the show with Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, there's just the attention to detail that we pay to every little thing that it's probably noticed only subconsciously, but it adds to the final product of the show. For everything to be appreciated, and what I see is just these artworks, these artists just be
Hmm.
inspired by the show and create these really heart touching and amazing artwork. I think that was probably the most amazing thing for me to see.
Yeah. And am I correct? Is this your first series? Because I know
Yes.
many, very visual effects heavy blockbusters under your belt for films, but how does that compare? How did the process of making a series compare to one of those films?
Episodics are a different beast for sure. I especially we brought The Last of Us to a very high level from prep to shoot. I'm not just speaking for visual effects. Every step of the way, the bar was set very high, so it really felt like I was making 9 feature films on this series. So it was very there was very intense, very stressful moments, but it was very gratifying as well, just because the amazing thing is, when a film comes out, you have to premiere. There's definitely steps of just being done, right? We deliver, we're done, the movie comes out, we're happy, and it does well. Um, with episodic, the fun aspect of it is, or not fun, but also fun, is we're constantly delivering episode to episode. But as the episodes are coming out every week, it's like you're enjoying your premiere every week for 9 weeks. So that was really gratifying, and that was really a really neat experience to have.
Well, it was fantastic work on The Last of Us. Thank you for sitting down and chatting about it with me. For everyone who's out there watching, subscribe to Gold Derby. Stick with us this season. Alex, thank you so much again.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.